shadows of Black Hollow, and then vanished. The road into Black Hollow ate the light like a mouth. Jonas Hale drove slow because towns remembered the slow ways, how names sat in porches, and how doors learned the shape of certain feet. His aunt's house huddled at the valley's throat, a weathered Victorian with sagging gingerbread and an attic window that seemed to blink at him. He had returned to sign papers, to be practical. Instead, the house answered his practicality with a silence that felt like waiting. He stepped inside, and the house pressed itself into familiar neglect. Dust patterned like fingerprints on the stair rail, a rug folded where a chair had once sat. A mantel clock hung stilled at 2:07, its face blank of recent hours. The hall mirror looked as if it remembered another room, its glass clouded, the reflection slightly softer than reality. Jonas told himself an empty house had nothing to hide, but his voice, returning from the hallway, took on the wrong weight, a little too small for the space it had come from. Agnes Marrow lived 2 doors down and remembered everything in the deliberate way of people who do not trust forgetting. She came with pies that smelled faintly of lemon and hands that trembled when she pointed at the attic window. "Take what you must," she said slowly, "but be mindful the hollow has a taste for certain things." Jonas smiled politely, the way you smile at weather reports. He left with a list of names and an unease that felt vaguely medicinal, as if memory itself had been prescribed too strong. He found the key beneath a loose floorboard, small, brass, pitted by long use, as if impatient decades had turned it to rust. It fit no present lock, but warmed in his palm like a living thing when he thumbed it. The hall mirror, when he walked past, showed a fraction of a second later, as if the glass were considering whether to keep pace. That delay put a space between Jonas and himself he could not so easily cross. The house was learning to breathe on its own. In the attic, there was more dust than memory, and a single cedar trunk. Its lid protested with a sigh. Inside lay a tarnished silver locket that held no photograph, only a hollow of cold where an image might belong. When he pressed it closed, the metal thrummed faintly against his wrist, like a heartbeat recorded at the edges of hearing. He told himself it was the house settling, the way an old body adjusts at night. That explanation lasted until the first note appeared on the kitchen table in handwriting that matched his, saying simply, "Remember differently." Days folded into a slow ledger of wrongness. Socks found in places they had never been. A cup moved half an inch from the breakfast table. Sentences in his handwriting that described nights he did not remember. The mirror would show him reading those sentences before he had opened the paper. The door to the street would stand open, and then, when he rechecked, be latched as if no one had ever intended to leave. The house permitted him freedom in increments it measured out itself. Night brought other laws. Mirrors began to lag more noticeably. A reflection might blink a breath later, or tilt its head a moment after he had stopped. Once, standing before the hall mirror, Jonas watched a version of himself smile at an idea that had not crossed his mind. It was a small motion, so polite you could almost mistake it for a trick of light. He felt watched by mathematics. The house kept time to its own equation, and his place in that equation was shrinking. He went back to Agnes because the forgetting that was happening to him felt like theft of a more intimate sort. She spoke of family trees that looped back on themselves, of people who left without luggage and arrived nowhere at all. The hollow wants a shape, she said, and sometimes a shape is a person who keeps the house honest. Jonas wanted to argue, to apply facts like ointment to the soft places of superstition. Instead, he pressed the brass key into his palm and felt the house's warmth answer in his skin. He tried to leave and found the road changed. Black Hollow's lane curved back in on itself, the same hedgerow repeating like a phrase with no end. His watch agreed with the stalled mantel clock in the house for no sensible reason. Hours compressed and expanded as if the valley were breathing. The silver locket pulsed against his shirt, and between pulses, he could have sworn he heard his own name said in a voice that was both his and someone else's memory of him. The attic drew him that night with a gravity that was not physical. The mirror at the landing, clouded but alive, presented an empty parlor where there should have been a chair, and a stair where there was only dust. Shadows pooled in patterns that made sense if one allowed memory to misbehave. He followed one, an outline that answered to his step, until the house rearranged itself so that the attic door closed behind him without his hand touching the latch. The sense of being observed climbed under his sternum like cold glass. When he pushed the mirror aside, a foolish human impulse, the surface did not yield the way glass should. It held a cool resistance beneath which something like depth suggested itself. Another room, another Jonas, a slow-motion echo. He pressed his palm and felt a place where memory and matter were sewn thin. For a heartbeat, his reflection reached back before he had moved, then leaned forward, and the attic felt very small. The house offered him a choice he had not consented to make. He came back down, and the town had a different hush. Windows that had been lit yesterday were dark, as if the gaslight had never been. Agnes' porch chair sat empty and neat. Names on mailboxes were the same, but felt like labels on a display, present, but not inhabited. When he called, his voice returned to him in a chorus, layered and patient. The silver locket chilled to stone at his throat, and where the house should have been solid, he felt instead the subtle give of a thing that could open like a book and never close. He put the brass key into the front door, and it would not turn. The metal resisted him, as if remembering fits another hand. In the hall mirror, multiples of him were beginning to appear, versions that hesitated with the exact timing of his doubt, faces full of small, private decisions. The locket opened on its own, and inside a single scraped word glowed so faintly he almost missed it. Then the house listened like a loaded hinge. His chest tightened around a syllable he could not swallow. He moved toward the stairs like a man answering a summons he had not heard, because the summons had become memory. Each stair creaked in an old rhythm. Each step made the mirror lag a breath longer. By the time he reached the attic, the house felt full of shapes that were not solid, suggestions of someone folding themselves out of corners, impressions left by footsteps that had never fallen. He turned to look at his reflection, and the glass offered not an image, but a suggestion of unmaking. As as if the house were patient enough to take him apart slowly. Then, in a small, private moment where language thins, something in the glass blinked and did not come back. The room sucked the sound from the air, and the attic window held a single sudden clarity, as if a lens had been removed. Jonas felt his name called in a timbre that matched his own voice's memory, and with that recognition, the house relaxed like a muscle, releasing a tendon. He took a step backward, thought to run, and then the world folded one last time around a negative space where he had been. The house kept its shape. Outside, Black Hollow exhaled, then vanished,